how do we make sure that our learners are still creating, are still critically thinking using AI? AI-powered education is next. Casey and I are here to make sure our learners are using their brain in this AI generation. And that's what so many people are afraid of, that we're not, as educators, allowing students to use their brain. And studies are coming out, like the fears that are out there. And I know, Casey, you're going to reference them in a moment, but all this fear of how we're going to lose the ability to create, problem solve, think critically. Well, that is not what we've been talking about in our program all along. It is about still sustaining that critical thinking level. So what tell us a little bit about this study and your thoughts around it.
Well, we may or may not link this study to this video, but just recently we heard about Brookings Institute Center for Universal Education. They talked about how the big soundbite, the big takeaway is that AI. Basically, as we've talked about and referenced before, AI has the capacity to do all of the thinking for a student, and therefore it's actually deteriorating the student's learning. Reference the study that was done months ago where it showed the brain activity and all of that, right? We've talked about this. We know that there's evidence to suggest when you're a passive recipient of AI generative tools, large language models, that you're not using your brain, period. We got that. We know this, but yet we also are users of AI every day, all day long. And so what we're talking about right now is how do we get past that initial fear, that initial understanding of what AI can do for students in education, and we get to the real results, right? Which is when educators want to incorporate AI tools in their classroom, they have strategies that will allow for critical thinking. There are ways to use AI tools to enhance students' understanding and activate their brains in a whole different way. This is just problem solving, right? That's what we need to remember is like the problem here is, can AI generate an answer to a question? Sure. But we still need to teach the students to scrutinize the answer, to say, why is that the answer? How did it get that? What resources did it use? How can you get to the same answer in your own way? And like, I come back to like research that is presented by news outlets as just a soundbite, and the headline is so misleading. And it turns educators like ourselves away from tools that can actually maximize their own independence as an educator and the student's independence as a learner.
Yeah, and again, it goes all the way back to what we always say, but we've forgotten this because we're afraid of AI. It's just like, what is the climate, the community you're building in your classroom? What are your classroom, your rules? Like, your school and your district has rules, but in what you can control, your own agency, your own learner's agency, what is the policy, not just with technology, but to maybe nuance it a bit more, right? And like with AI, because it's a little bit more of a supercharged breed of beast, like what do we believe? And do we want to come to this room each day and not use our brains and not, create and not be critical? Like, what do we all want? So if you could come together and talk about that again before you start using these tools, whether it's any kind of tech or AI, or just the safety and the feel and what you believe is true about your own classroom.
Right. Well, and I think, in my classroom, there are many different stages my students are at in their understanding and their usage. I think it's probably best that, at the beginning of a new class, and, probably even now in the middle of a class too, but at some point, the teacher needs to provide an opportunity for the students to discuss together what solutions are going to be best. And so an example of this on my speech team, we're a competitive speech team in outstate, rural community. But yet we're very much invested in understanding how technology can improve and deteriorate and all of the things, right? The whole spectrum. So I asked my students to work together to come up with a policy that's suitable for our activity, that's suitable for our team and what we know. They spent time researching what do they know and understand about all of the different AI, primarily, language models like ChatGPT and other tools like that. They researched it and they tried to really understand the benefits for them to use it, the drawbacks of using it, and then at different times and in different categories too, because in speech, we have live in-person communication where they have the internet at their fingertips, but there's also ones where they sit down and they research and they write and they have time to really craft their message, right? So in those circumstances, they determined what was best for our entire team and they presented it to us. They have ownership over this policy.
Exactly. Ownership.
I just can't even begin to explain the benefits of just even having the conversation can bring to individuals and to a team, right? To see us as a collective unit, that we're in this together and it's not just a bunch of singletons making a decision about what they're going to do.
No. And I know through competition, if you don't do that early on, you will get burned somewhere along the way in a regulation or whatever, because your team didn't buy in all together and following what you all believed in, because some teams that will happen to them because no one's having that conversation as a group, as a team, as a community.
Well, so, and if we live in that fear of the technology, if we as coaches and educators say, you can't learn with it, your brain literally isn't functioning at its capacity, blah blah blah, I'm sorry, I downplay it only because I have witnessed firsthand, and as we've talked about for the last 2 years, the benefits that it can bring to individuals, right? So we know the capacity of it as users, but the students, especially our youngest who are just learning this, if our coaches approach it, or if our teachers approach it with that mindset, unfortunately, that's the one that they're going to adapt as well. And I think they're going to be left behind. I think they are going to either, like you said, somehow face some consequence later on in our season or in their lives where they can't claim ignorance. Can't be like, I didn't know. We can't do that.
That's our opportunity to guide. And I'm just going to say too that, as we know, there are a lot of tools out there you may not be aware of, and we'll highlight at least one that shows how you can have a really deep conversation with the learners in your room, and you're not just creating it on your own. Like, we always want some little guide rails to help us, and there are tools out there. There are US tools that are out there. There are global tools that are out there. And Kapor is an example that we'll highlight here. But it really guides you to talk about how important those conversations with your learners or your competitors, with the young people, are, to make sure that you all are, like you said earlier, that you all buy in, that you all created it together. And if we don't do that, then we're not teaching critical thinking. Right. Yeah. So we need to take care of these things before they become, and they are becoming big issues, right?
Exactly.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.